still a pass first point guard, still Mike Richmond, still listening to Locked On Blazers, and I almost screwed up the intro to this third segment, but I didn't. That's an incredible save. It's not that incredible. We talked about the Blazers' loss to the Warriors on Friday in our fastest recap in the West to open the show. We talked about where they are, very similar to last season, very similar, because the roster hasn't changed very much. Of course, they look the same. Like, you put out the same group, you should expect relatively the same results. Changing coaching can help. It hasn't really dramatically. I think there's still reason to give Chauncey Billups another, 60 games plus three years. He's under contract for four seasons. To figure it out, right? Like, I'm not at all even really criticizing the job Billups has done. I think he's fine. Maybe even going to be really good at this. Like, he's fine as a coach. It's just like the roster can only do so much. You can only ask the group of the Jimmies and Joes can only do so much because the X's and O's only change a little bit. And even if they change a little bit, even if the scheme gets better, you always have a cap on the ceiling. There's a ceiling on the roster, cap on the ceiling. I think there's a roof usually up there typically, but like the talent is what will determine your sort of altitude in the league. And then there are marginal differences a coaching staff can make. I have always believed that coaching is probably something like 35% of the equation, and 65% is the talent on the roster. Luke Walton went 24-0 as the head coach of the 73-win Warriors. He's now out of a job after finishing below 500 in 3 consecutive seasons with the Kings. Y'all know what it is. Having good players makes the coaching easier. It's just always been true. And I think this Blazers 2-year run is like giving us that truth. And in fact, I have been consistent in my belief with this. If you're a new listener, I've been singing this same song for a while. And if you're a longtime listener, you've heard me say this before. You're like, yeah, Mike, we know. Super eye roll into your podcast feed or on YouTube. But back in July, I recorded a show. And the title of the show was, It's Time to Blow Up the Blazers Core. Now, I am citing myself like an annoying college professor. I will admit that. I never enjoyed when my college professors cited an earlier lecture as if the lecture they gave us at the beginning of semester held more truth when you got to the end. I'm merely doing this to show that I thought this in July. And this was before Norman Powell resigned, before the Larry Nance trade. This was heading into free agency. I said, hey, listen, we're here. It's about to happen. And I think the Blazers need to blow up their core. I think it's time to trade CJ McCollum, trade Yusuf Nurkic, trade Anthony Simons if need be. Like it's time to do something different around Dame, because you know what it's going to be. Like I said at the top of the show, and I want to be clear here, I think the Blazers can do nothing and finish 4th in the West. Nothing. I think they can just roll this ball out with the same crew, let Chauncey Billups kind of find his rhythm as a coach, hope it all works out, and I think you can finish 4th in the West. But that speaks more to the talent in the West. Like, I think 4 through 10 is relatively even. I think it's a bunch of mediocre teams. I think it's some, the Nuggets are totally just getting dismantled by injuries. Like they're in trouble, just health wise. The Clippers are a really good defensive team, but don't always have it on offense if their threes aren't falling. Dallas is fine, but they're still missing one more dude who can drive to the rim. There's just sort of a bunch of teams in the Blazers range that I think are all Memphis is probably better than I thought they would be, but they're still not going to challenge for 3rd in the West or whatever. And the Lakers are kind of crappy. They might figure it out or trade Russell Westbrook, et cetera. But I think I don't think that there's a huge talent gap between that group of teams and the Blazers. I think they can literally do nothing. Absolutely nothing, and stay where they are. But I want to use the sort of context of Friday's game. The Blazers were not competitive in that game particularly. They fell behind in the middle 2 quarters and never got back to the point where you thought they could win. You got back to the point where if everything breaks right, there's 5 minutes left. Okay, Larry Nance made a layup. Okay, how many stops can they get? Oh no, here comes Steph Curry. They're just a full step below that Warriors team. And I think they can do nothing and stay a step below and finish 4th in the West and win 44, 44 to 49 games and feel pretty good about where they are. Finishing fourth in the Western Conference is a pretty good season. But if the goal is to win a championship, or the goal is to be able to credibly say you can reach for a championship, nothing has changed since I pressed publish on July 6th in my mind. I still think the Blazers need a sort of foundation changing trade. That's trading CJ McCollum, it's trading Norman Powell, it's trading Yusuf Nurkic. Maybe not all three in conjunction, but something's got to give. It's if you can't find a taker there, it's trading Anthony Simons because he's your best and most and brightest young part. You might regret it down the line, but if the Blazers are going to take a swing, they have to go ahead and do it. They have to go ahead and take that swing. I thought it in July. It's November 28th here. They've played 20 games. They look very similar to what they were last year. And what they were last year was a pretty good team. Like, I don't want to get it twisted. They finished with tied for the fifth best record and due to tiebreakers slipped to sixth in the West. Like, they seem like that again, a competitive playoff team, a team that with the right playoff matchup, you'd say, okay, maybe they can win a playoff series. But if they play one of the top tier teams, if they finish in that, bottom, that 6, 7, 8 range in the West, you know what it is. They're going home early. And without even unpacking all the implications of another early playoff exit and what it might mean for Damian Lillard and for the whole franchise, like, if the goal is to be competitive, if the goal is to go into the playoffs and say we can win a title, the Blazers can't do that with this roster. We've seen it through 20 games, a big enough sample size to kind of suggest. We saw it on Friday against the best team in the league, how far the Blazers are away. We know the truth. So without playing trade machine, I'm going to issue you, dear listener, a challenge. Here's where we're at. Let's put this in context and reality of the Blazers season. I like trades. I like player movement. What I don't like about trade machine. Let me be clear with this, and longtime listeners will know that I'm not a trade machine person. Is the unrealistic trades. Hey, what do you think about Yusuf Nurkic for Miles Turner? I mean, cool. Yes, trade for a better player. No shit. But like, why would the Pacers do that? And I hate having to unpack that on the episode. Like, why? So here's what I challenge you, dear listeners. And this is to listener Adam and listener Justin, some of my true Picassos painting with Trade Machine out there and the Fanspo trade tools. The Blazers want to get under the salary, luxury tax rather. So they need to shed $3 million in salary. Can you find me a trade in the world that makes the Blazers a better basketball team, either on paper or sort of in theory, that also saves them $3 million? Because that is the quest that Neil Olshey is on between now and the February deadline, is he needs to save this team money and make them better. Can you do that? That is, if you can find me a trade that saves the Blazers $3 million and also improves the roster overall, I'll dedicate a full segment to you and give you a super shout out and 8 full minutes unpacking a realistic trade. You send me some trades that aren't realistic, I'm just gonna send you back a thumbs down. This is sort of the challenge in reality, right? Is like, the Blazers need a shakeup. They need to get better. Nothing has changed since July. Like, they are what they are. They're a totally decent team that can't win a championship, and they're also a totally decent team that is going to refuse to pay the luxury tax for a variety of financial reasons. And I'm asking you, dear listener, who's listening to this podcast while the Blazers are scuffling on a road trip, you like this team, you're interested in it, and you probably are interested in improving this team. So I challenge you, find me a trade where the Blazers save $3 million. They get $3 million cheaper to get below the luxury tax line and to get better. You can, whatever means it gets to, but whatever you got to do, but has to be sort of CBA legal and realistic. If you can find me that trade, I'll highlight you and give you a huge shout out here on the podcast. It ain't easy. And it's my resistance to trade machine is that I want to operate in reality. The part of basketball I like is the basketball. So I want to operate in reality. There are your parameters. There's your reality. Make this team better, save them some money. That's the challenge to you. It's inevitable that a trade has to happen because it's not inevitable that it has to happen. They can put, like I said, they can push forward with this, but if they're serious about being competitive, they can't go into the playoffs with this group, because you know what this group is. They're fine, and they're a first round playoff loss. And if whatever. I don't exactly know from an ownership standpoint what a successful season looks like, but I'm willing to wager you, dear listener, think that a successful season is more competitive looking than that. So that's why I challenge you to either come up with this trade or, just keep listening, because we'll push forward and figure out what the Blazers need together. I will try to do my best to unpack the reality, but I wanted to issue a challenge because I know some of you are really good at this, and I want to give you a chance to shine.